Hello.
Hi, Suzanne. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Wow, we're just waiting a minute here to get.
Good evening.
Who else is there? Ross is there. How are you, sir?
Hello, everybody.
There's Pat. Let me find John.
Not there yet.
Unless his name is Summer tonight. I don't think so. Is Jeff still down there?
Yeah, he's right. Hey, Jeff. Hi, Chris. Didn't even see you sneaking.
I did. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Jeff, thank you on these.
Does anyone else need one? Did anyone else get back?
Is it here, the new one?
This is
No,
the
it's
one
just, there's
through-
just an MOA that extended.
Oh, is it in there though?
No, it's not. I can send it to you as I'm sitting here.
Oh, it says-
Okay, yes, this, we should have that. Thank you.
Elena, did you need the teacher's contract? Jeff has none.
Yes.
Who's going to share? Good. Are you sharing the PowerPoint or EP? Good.
I'm sorry, Ross, we were muted. Who's gonna share? Suzanne? All right, I'll promote you
We're here.
What are we doing, the starting first?
eventually. We'll get there in a minute or two. There we go. I'll keep looking for Johnny. He hasn't signed on yet. So we were good. Whenever you are, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank you all for being at our early this week meeting of the Board of Education, hosting our tonight on Tuesday because of this week's holiday. We appreciate you waiting for us while we completed our executive session, and I would like to call the meeting to order if everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pardon me, I'm gonna
That was new.
ask and hear me just a little bit better. Okay, let's try that. Definitely better. Okay. I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of November 10th, 2021.
Motion.
Joe, would someone second that?
Second.
Is everyone in favor?
Aye.
Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda tonight?
There are not tonight.
Okay, then we will turn it over to Mr. Blake for the report of the superintendent.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Ross, Suzanne, and Catherine. We'll get to them in just a moment to present to the group here some redistricting information. A couple of quick things for tonight. You will see on the agenda coming up after our presentation, we have our Scholar Athlete Team Award recognition. We also have just over 120, just under 130 individual Scholar Athletes. For the world out there that's not quite familiar with Scholar Athlete Award, it's students that possess a 90% or higher GPA while participating in scholastic athletics. The team award is for any team where 75% of their athletes are a Scholar Athlete individually. So we have a lot of teams represented. Congratulations to the students, their families, and our teams for that work. would have been on the website for the agenda. Sorry. Also, a couple of us were able to attend, I think it was last Thursday night, the Stroud National Junior Honor Society. Mr. O'Rourke is here. Congratulations. I think it was 62, 68. I knew it was one of the two. 68 students awarded and or honored by getting into the Stroud National Junior Honor Society. So congratulations to them, and thank you to Mr. O'Rourke, Mr. Tien, and Mr. Waite, I think is the other advisor, right? So congratulations and thank you for all that work. Coming back from break next week, we will be getting round one of our social emotional learning skills inventory, which is a district-wide survey of students, their teachers, and their parents. Will be offered an opportunity to provide a quick 10-question survey on their students' ability and their awareness around social emotional learning. So we're hoping that over the course of the year, we'll do this 3 times. We'll be able to kind of triangulate between a teacher's perception of a student's social emotional environment and their parents' interpretation of their own child. So we're going to be able to try and get some data and information as to how we are perceiving things with kids as compared to their own parents. So we're excited to be able to do that. As mentioned, I think last meeting with Amanda here, we are the only district currently in the company that's in the country that's been selected by this organization to do this work. They've done some previous work around the country with a few districts in the Southwest, but they didn't have any data from the Northeast. And we asked if we told them we'd be interested a couple of years ago. They kind of canceled the project. We expressed that we were a little bit disappointed. We thought the information would be helpful, and the organization came back and said we would love to work with you. So here we are, and that will start right when we come back from break. And it's about a 2-week window for parents and staff to kind of complete those survey responses for the kids. Speaking of redistricting, next Monday night, our 3 friends here on the screen will be with us at Stroud Middle School, 6 p.m. to do a community roundtable. They're going to have some conversations about what they're seeing, thinking, and then give the community an opportunity to roundtable with each other, brainstorm some ideas, provide some information so that they can go back and do their final touch-ups on their thoughts and recommendations. So that's next Monday night at Stroud Middle School at 6 p.m. and it will be in the cafeteria, which is in the backside of the 2nd floor if you are at Stroud. Last thing I just want to mention for anybody out there listening, if you are a family or you know a family that's in need of assistance for the holidays, please don't hesitate to reach out to our school administrators or school counselors, social workers. The district has a lot of resources at our disposal to be able to assist families in getting hooked up with any kind of need that you have. So this is a time of year where you have a lot of community assistance and a lot of organizations that want to help, and sometimes families don't know where to turn. So I just want to remind folks that the school district is a wonderful resource to be able to assist families that have needs really related to anything 12 months out of the year. But this is the time of year where people seem to kind of want to come forward a little bit more than normal. So if you are someone that's in need or knows somebody in need, I please urge you to contact the school district or your school so that we can help with any of those arrangements to make sure folks have everything that they need during this time of the year. With that, I turn it back over to you. Is that John on there? Yes. I'm going to guess.
Yes.
All right.
All right, thank you very much. We have added an item to our agenda, except our student board member is not with us tonight due to a conflict, but going forward, we will have our student board member engaging a little more and giving us an update at our meetings. I'd also like to echo Mr. O'Rourke. Mr. Nash and I were able to attend the ceremony, and it was lovely and very impressive to see your amazing students. So thank you for welcoming us. And since Kara is the only one here tonight, I'm guessing we don't have any public comment. So we are going to move into our work study session. As Mr. Blake indicated, we have Ross Haber Associates here with us tonight. We have Ross himself, Catherine and Suzanne, and we have had them working throughout the year on looking at optimizing how our buildings are configured and what plans we need to make for the future in our district. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
So I think we'd like to just start off by going through a slide presentation that we put together. I think it'll kind of bring everybody up to date as to where we are and what's going to be happening in the immediate future, up to including the community meeting on Monday and a meeting we'll be having with the district architect on Tuesday. So Suzanne, if you want to bring up the PowerPoint.
Oh, there we go. Excellent.
Everyone see that?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so great. All right, so what we'd like to do is kind of take you through all the steps and things that are going on, some of the options that we put together and some of the plans that we have. So can I have the first slide, please? Okay, so Susan, why don't you take us through what's happened so far? Okay.
Yes. So to kind of just give you a sense of what we've been up to and what's to come, I would say we're a good part of the way through gathering the information, synthesizing it. And so what we've been working on is looking at the existing catchment and assessing the lines there and the other components to each of the catchments. We've done interviews with each of the principals. We've done a facility walkthrough of all of the elementary schools as well as the middle school and cloth. We've had several meetings to discuss the educational program and done some analysis for that in terms of understanding the goals for the future, as well as how the existing schools, specifically elementary schools, are able to respond to that. And then we've also looked at the utilization of each of the elementary schools and developed preliminary feasibility plans, which will be packaged up as part of the report, but we're kind of showcasing tonight some of the more numbers-based data. And we've developed so far the redistricting options that we feel are the most applicable based on all of those factors. In a previous report, there were some other options, and we've kind of, based on the feedback we got and some additional data and information, we've been able to refine those and provide a more refined list of options. In terms of what's next, you did just kind of remind everyone about the community dialogue session that's happening on Monday, so next week, Monday. And we will be meeting with the district architect next week as well. So as we kind of get into the home stretch of this effort and the study, looking at how the redistricting impacts the facilities and any potential needs there for future planning purposes, coordinating with the architect is an important step there. The ultimate goal is to select an option to move forward with and finalize that plan. As part of that plan, there'll be a lot of the educational aspects, facility recommendations, and redistricting catchment and the catchment aspects incorporated into that final plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Ross.
All right, so just to kind of just go quickly over some of the goals and objectives of this study, just to kind of bring us up to where we are. Well, first and foremost, is to develop a short-term plan to resolve classroom and program issues created by the closing of Staley Elementary School. You know, one of the issues with Staley, on top of everything else, was it was the largest of the elementary schools. So when we all got hit, you guys from getting kids into schools and us from working on this plan, there was 528 students at that point that needed to be redistributed. That's a lot of students and a lot of space taken up. So in the short term, we need to help you resolve that problem. Okay. The second thing is to take that resolution and create a sustainable long-term plan to meet the instructional space needs of the Rome City School District. So the word sustainable, a lot of times overused, but it's important. It's not been that long since you went from a K-4 to a K-6 program. And we want to make sure that whatever comes out of this study is something that can exist for a long time into the future. Okay, and in terms of doing that, we want to examine the options that are available to the district to meet these needs. And these options include, but they may not necessarily be limited to, changes in grade level structures. We talked about different organizational structures, grade banding, K-6, K-3, those kinds of things. The creation of a middle school or a middle school model. was another option that we're looking at is considering the creation of 2 middle schools and creating a true middle school program with pre-K-5 schools. And in all cases, to take a look at what changes in need in the attendance zones to balance the enrollment, to make sure that the schools are populated appropriately in terms of class sizes, in terms of instructional programs, and those kinds of things. The other piece of it, though, we're not, it's funny you mentioned, Suzanne, Basin Studio and Ross Haber says, we are equal partners in this. And I'm looking at a lot of the data stuff that helps promote some of the programs moving forward, and providing Basin with the information to move ahead with different educational programs and recommendations to bring to meet the needs of 21st century learners, basically, to bring the schools all up to date. And then finally, to elicit input from school and community stakeholders regarding the options presented in the study. Whatever comes out of this study, it's incredibly important that we be transparent and open with all of the stakeholders, whether they're school personnel, faculty, administration, community members, parents, PTA members, municipal government members. It's got to be open and clear, and that's what the purpose of these community meetings are. Next one, please. Okay, so just to address sustainability for a minute, the plans that eventually may be adopted by the Board of Education must be long-term. They must be at least a minimum 5 to 10 years based upon reasonable enrollment projections. And we'll talk about the projections in a minute, but I think that whatever we do can be long-term because of the level enrollment, the steady enrollment that's existed in Rome over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And then, of course, any changes we make, they have to be able to accommodate the current and future needs of general education and special education students. So those are the kinds of things that we've had in mind that have kind of been the guiding principles of this project. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, just this is a 10. I've done an extensive enrollment projection, and in the larger report, we'll have much more detail and other tables that will better explain. But very quickly, if we take a look at a 10-year overview, where the district was at the base year of the study, which was 2016-17, where it is in the current year, as of the BEDS report, as of October, or the end of September, October this year, what the difference was in that period of time, and then the projection out to 226, 227. And what you're taking a look at really is a really even or a steady enrollment. It's level. It's been staying in the mid to high 5,000s, and the projection is that's where it's going to remain. I want to point out one thing on here. As I said before, as of the BEDS report for 2020-21, there were 582 students in Staley, and those are the students that had to be redistributed over all of the other schools. So it created problems everywhere, and remarkably, based upon what Susan and Catherine told me, the district is managing really, really well under difficult circumstances, and hopefully the end product of this study is going to relieve these kinds of problems over time. Can I have one more slide, please? So very quickly, the enrollment in the Rome City School District has remained relatively stable between 2016-17 and 2021. The long-term projection indicates that the enrollment will continue to be stable, remaining in the mid 5,000 student range. I also want to point out that there was a jump in enrollment from 2020-21 to 2021-22, and we think it was students coming back to the district after COVID. So, but again, we feel at least I feel that's where the enrollment's going to stay. Now, although there is some new housing being developed in the city, I don't believe that based upon the type of units being built and the timeline of construction, that this will have a major impact. This will not have a major impact on enrollment. If we just one more slide, please. And this is, I received this information from the Rome City Planning and Zoning Commission, and it's given me information regarding all of the projects that are coming in. The majority of the construction that is short term are basically 1 and 2 bedroom apartments or 1 and 2 bedroom townhouses. I don't expect those to yield too many students over the next 5 years. The big project on the books is Woodhaven Ventures. And that's a development of 250 single-family homes. Now, two issues with that. Number one, I spoke to the developer, and the developer was very clear, is that they're projecting this over the next 10 years. So it's not anything that's going to happen immediately. The second thing about that is, and if it does happen, it's going to happen later on in this proposal. Number two, my understanding is they're not building on spec, but they're building to custom orders. So there's an anticipation of 25 units a year over 10 years, but there's no way to really know that. And the third thing about this is that these are 3 and 4 bedroom, 1,400 square foot homes. So they're not very large homes. So they're not going to be the kind of homes that will project too many children. It will project a great number of children. Now, for the estimate of the number of homes, I think that might come in for the duration of this project, I'm thinking in total about 94 children. So we're talking somewhere between all of the construction over the next 5 years at best would be maybe 130 or 140 students, or 120 students actually, but that's spread over 13 grades and it's spread over 5 years and it's back-ended. So again, I don't believe that this is going to have any major impact on any changes that come about as a result of this project. I would urge that the board keep watching what goes on with the developers, keep watching what's going on with the planning board to see if there are changes, if the economy changes to a point where homes get built greater, if more projects and developments coming in. But I think right now, based upon everything, we can project that the enrollment is going to stay in that mid to high 5,000 range, at least over the next 5 and probably 7 to 10 years. So, and I do have a high level of confidence in that. Next, please. So I think Catherine wants to comment on this slide.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So as we were saying early on, Ross is doing an incredible job looking at the numbers, looking at how many students are throughout the district, what is upcoming with new builds and developments. And what we've been taking a look at is more on the educational side, getting a good understanding of what does elementary education look like for Rome City School District. Understanding the nuances of the pre-K to 3 grade levels versus the 4 and above. Knowing that you guys had mentioned, and it was reiterated multiple times during additional conversations and walkthroughs about play-based learning for the younger students and project-based learning for the older. We actually, in October, Suzanne and I did those facility walkthroughs over the course of a couple of days. And it was pretty incredible to see everything in action. At that time, obviously, Staley had already been closed, so all of the schools had absorbed the additional students, the additional educators. And I first have to comment that everyone was so incredibly positive and welcoming during all of this that, had we not known of the struggles that you guys had to do 2 days before school opening, I don't know if I would have been aware of it just by everyone's demeanor. And it was really, really awesome to walk through and be in all of those environments. Prior to the walkthroughs, we had interviews with each of the principals to gain better understanding on each individual school. And what was interesting is that each principal kind of painted a different picture of the culture and the types of students or the types of happenings that were going on within each building. And so when we were walking through the facilities, it was neat to see how uniform and consistent all of the buildings actually felt when it came to the educational delivery. We saw many classrooms doing various modes of teaching and learning. So there was the direct instruction, all of the students focused on the teacher. There was independent work, there was small group work, there were teachers paired up with a couple other students, there were students paired up with other students. And it was just the sense of unity in all of the buildings was really neat because, like I said before, the principals had painted kind of that different picture of maybe what we could expect. We also were able to witness the the struggles that were currently being had with specials no longer having dedicated rooms, with supported learning and resource type programming needing to either pull into the classrooms or be held out in the corridors just out of a lack of space because everyone did have to absorb all of the students and educators from Staley. But all in all, I mean, I think everyone was handling it well, but this should be that short-term fix for hopefully what the options will present as more of a long-term reality for Rome. We've been able to identify through our conversations, through our walkthroughs, kind of what those core programming areas, core programming grade levels want to be, as well as what those desired programs are. So having a presence of the connected community schools, having a presence and focus on health and wellness. Many schools express the desire to have cool down spaces or mental health spaces. Some of them were actually able to carve out space, some of them were not. Creating those dedicated supporting learning or specials would be one of the priorities that we were beginning to look at when we're exploring these options. Above that, how we could potentially be enhancing, or how you could potentially be enhancing your additional programs. So your makerspace, your STEAM type programming. We saw a lot of robotics and makerspace type activity kits within your libraries. But what could be gained if we could find space within your facilities to actually have a dedicated space for students and teachers to go to. Breakout spaces like multi-purpose and commons, creating outdoor learning, creating school-based health clinics potentially based on the different district or the different schools within the district. And then above all else, finding adequate storage for teacher resources, for school resources, and some of that will be resolved once everything kind of begins to work itself out with Staley's closure. But those were kind of just the highlights that we were seeing as we were walking through these spaces and having the conversations.
I'll just add one in terms of educational delivery. We were able to speak with a few of the educators as we walked through, and the desire for collaboration between teachers and having space for professional learning communities, or just the space to collaborate and interact so that they could compare kind of lessons and approach and learn in that regard.
Okay, so we'd like to run through now some of the options that we've come up to. And basically, we're going to present three options, two of which have subsets. So we'll try and explain this to you as we go along. So let me look at the first one. Okay, option one. Option one is grade banding, in which we're banding grades K3 and 4-6. Give me next slide, please. And so this is, so grade banding, in this option, the district could maintain this structure, which would require, but it would require considerable expansion of each of the schools. This option, okay, so option one is we could take a look at what the and we will in the next few slides, at what the buildings would look like as banded schools. The pink area, by the way, represents Stokes and Joy as banded schools. The blue area, the light blue area, is Bellamy and Ridge Mills as banded schools, and the green is Dente and Gansevoort as banded school. And as I said, in this option, the district could maintain the structure, but this would require considerable expansion of each of the schools, which I'll show you. But so that would be A. There would be option 1A, sub A. Sub B would be taking this option and offer the district the opportunity to implement grade banding while planning to add a second middle school. Once built, the grade banded schools would then become pre-K and 4-6. I'm sorry, they become pre-K2 and 4-5. Clough, currently the preschool, would then be converted to a middle school. So the K3 and 4-6 option would exist until Clough could be converted to a middle school. Once that's done, the district becomes a pre-K2, a pre-K3 and 4-6. So let's go to, I think there's a little mix up here. We'll have to straighten that out. But the table, so 2 tables. Okay, option 1, Bellamy and Ridge Mills. As grade banded K6 schools, Bellamy would have a total of 573 children in it, and would need 22 classrooms, but would have 6 rooms open. In that area, by the way, just to note, there are 27 pre-K kindergarten students who live in that zone, that blue zone, who currently go to Clough. In this also, Ridge Mills, though, would have no open classrooms. So the issue then becomes what to do with instructional support, what to do with different kinds and different levels of programs. The children who are in the Ridge Mills zone go to the Bellamy school, even though they're older children, for certain kinds of programs. And the most distressing part of this, to me, is the class sizes. That if we look at that 22 in kindergarten, but then we have 25, 28, 27, 28, 27, and 25. Now I could take some of those, we could take some of those open classrooms and do some class size reduction, but again, that pulls programs away from, that pulls rooms away from other kinds of programs. In the phase 2 option, okay, 2 things occur. Number 1, we do open up 3 rooms in each building. But you take a look at the number of, at the average class sizes, they do go down. Our opinion is that this buildings would probably need some additional classroom construction. Remember, we're fighting a couple of things in the district. One, not only number of classrooms, but classroom sizes. There are some classroom spaces that really should not be used for full-size rooms, that you can't put 25 and 26 and 27 children in. So that does impinge upon the space. So there isn't a single model that we're going to present that doesn't have some need for renovation or construction. But we think going to the pre-K5 model would lessen the amount of construction, at least at the elementary school levels. So, and in this model, all of the children who attend Bellamy and Ridge Mills, who are in that grade banded group, would all go to Clough Middle School once it was open. And the only issue one of the issues that would have to be considered is that if the board went for this, and if Clough was to be upgraded or changed to a middle school, there would be a period of construction, and 130 or 135 or so preschool children who currently attend Clough, or who will attend Clough in the future, would have to be relocated until they could be brought back into their home elementary school zone, assuming there isn't room in the elementary school zone. So that's now let's go to the next band. This would be Denty and Gansevoort. In Denty and Gansevoort, if we do grade banding, again, there's about 6 rooms open. And again, when I say they're open, it's not that they're not being used. They're needed for instructional support and all those different kinds of things. But in terms of just distribution based upon that share, again, we're looking at very large class sizes. We're looking at 27 in kindergarten, 25, 28, 28, 26, 25, 26, and 29. And if there's any, if there's any growth at all in these particular schools, you're already kind of top heavy in terms of classroom size. So there's really no place to go but up, and there's no place to go up because of the numbers of kids. If we go down to, in this particular grouping, if we go to them as a pre-K 4-5, pre-K3 and 4-5 school, then we've got a total of 9 rooms open between the two rooms and between the 2 schools. And again, we could share some, the Gansevoort and Denty could share some programs where some of the kids who are in whatever their programs exist, if they're multi-graded instructional support groups, could go into the Denty program, go into the Gansevoort school where there's additional space. But again, with these, we've got very large class sizes. Now, in this pre-K model, in this pre-K 3, 4, 5 model, the students at Gansevoort and Denty would be split between Stroud and Clough for the middle school, because there's just too much population. They'd have to go to the 2 different schools. And go to the next map, and there's going to be a misspelling here, so you'll have to forgive me. Oh, you straightened it out. Oh, thank you. I didn't know I was going to get through cough, but anyway, so what you're looking at is that this section, which has some of Denty and some of Gansevoort, would go to Stroud. This section in the red line, which has some of Denty and some of Gansevoort, would go to Clough Middle School. One of the things that's come out of this, and we're not showing it tonight, but in terms of the two middle schools, we create the balance. They're both in the mid 600 range. And we're going to suggest when we speak to the architect, going to maybe building creating two 700 student middle schools, but that's for another discussion. But anyway, so this would be split. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the next is Stokes and Joy, and that pink is there, is the Stokes Joy Boundary. And again, if we take a look, at the K3, 4, 6 model, we're looking at between the two schools, four rooms open, but again, large class sizes. If we go to the pre-K3 and the 4-5 model, we have some reduction. We have some larger class sizes, but there's enough rooms to be able to reduce those numbers down. Now, keep in mind, in these cases, we're bringing pre-K students into these buildings, so we need room for those students also, as well as instructional support. And I also have to make a point here that I should have made when I started to do this. When I do the calculations for the numbers of students, I'm ignoring special permission. I have to, okay? What I'm doing counts of students in their zone. So one of the things that when we did the initial assessment based on current boundaries, I found that in some cases there were 50, 55, 60 students attending a school in one zone, although they lived in another. Now I came to understand what caused that and what the reasoning was, and I understand that there's been a move to try and limit that as much as possible. But in terms of what we're doing, I can't redistrict on that basis. I have to redistrict on the basis of the numbers of students who live in a given attendance area. And then once we know what that space is available, other things can come into play. I mean, if there are compelling reasons for special permission, at least it won't be done at the expense of overcrowding another building. At least it won't be at the expense of creating an imbalance. So understand, as I go through all of these processes, I'm ignoring the notion of special permission. What I'm paying attention to is room that's needed for instructional support and things like that. I think also, and correct me if I'm wrong, in doing our calculations, we didn't count art rooms where they exist and music rooms where they exist as classrooms. So none of these things say, okay, you've got all these classrooms, but we can't use art room we don't want to use it for general ed or whatever. We're not doing that. Those have been subtracted from the classroom counts in each of those.
Ross, I'm sorry, can I ask a quick question about that though? So
Yeah.
that point that you just made is skewed a little bit, because since we had to, since bringing you on and the closure of Staley, we do have a lot of art and music rooms that are being used as classrooms. So are you going on the database to prior to moving Staley in, or the way it looked as you visited the buildings in this school year?
We're doing it on the basis of what the structure of the school is supposed to be. In other words, I understand that the three of us collectively understand that every available space has to be taken up on the basis of redistributing 528 elementary school kids. So we know that that's happening. But when we look at the floor plan and we're making plans for future, the redistricting model, the options model, whatever it is, we say, okay, how many rooms do we realistically have to use if we want to create equity between the schools? If we want to make sure that there's an art room, there's a music room. At the very least, we want to conserve the ones that we have. We know that there's art on a cart in some schools. We know there are schools that don't have dedicated art rooms under any circumstance. So we know that. So where they exist, we keep them separate, even though they may be being used this year as gen ed classes, okay, just because of the emergency. We're separating them out. We want to paint a picture for you of what you can do. So for example, if I say in all of these options, we need some expansion, and maybe in some of the schools, you may need an expansion to create additional classroom space, to create art and music. Those are the kinds of things we're heading in. So the direction we're heading in. So we're not basing anything on your emergency. We're basing everything on your emergency and then what can be done to relieve it over the course of the next year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. So all of these things are taken into consideration. We want to paint the picture, we want to paint the picture with the data that allows you, the board, to start to make decisions, good decisions in terms of where you want to put your money in terms of developing this and moving forward. That's what this is about. I think that I know that Suzanne, Catherine, and I agree that one of the goals, one of the overarching goals is equity. One of the overarching goals is if there's a dedicated art room in Stokes, then there should be one in Joy. If there's one in Joy, then there should be one in Richmond, and so forth and so on. So all of these things go into that mixed basket. So anyway, this is option one. So option one is grade banding K3, 4, 6. If the district wanted to sustain that and keeping Stroud as a 7-8 school, then we believe that in order to do this, it would take considerable amount of construction. If we go to a middle school concept, which would have which would be pre-K3 and 4, 5 with 2 middle schools, it would still take considerable construction because we'd be converting cloth, but it would take lesser at the elementary schools, and maybe not even in all of the elementary schools. So that's kind of the sum of option one. Can we move on to option two?
And I also, to that question, I want to point out that part of our deliverables for this in the report will include floor plans that graphically show that point. So be very clear. I know seeing it as a chart of numbers is a little difficult to follow sometimes. So we will have it represented in that report as floor plans. And it'll be very clear which are gen ed classrooms, which are attempting to be dedicated art or other specials and supported learning, so that they're not kind of lumped together.
So any suggestions for modifications to the building would come later?
Yeah, so part of kind of at the summary at the end, you'll see that we anticipate this being a 3-phased approach. So part of the RFP was to develop a facility master plan. So this is kind of the initial phase one is to alleviate the pressures based on Staley, and to potentially redistribute that as a temporary or a short-term solution for some of that disparity. And then phase 2 and phase 3 would be to move it towards a more ideal, the ideal school scenario, the ideal learning models, those types of things.
And that takes into consideration whatever funding might become available because of the loss of Staley.
So that'll be part of our conversation with the architect and part of the subsequent things that we look into. Yes. So the long range facility master plan will include how do you get there.
Okay.
You know, one of the reasons that I'm looking forward to meeting with the architect is I think the meeting it's going to be kind of a brainstorming session in terms of him looking at what we're thinking and what we're talking about, and then he coming back to us on what's doable and what's not doable in real terms. You know, what buildings can be expanded, those kinds of things. So we're starting to branch out now. We've kind of got to where we think that we've narrowed the options down. Now it's a matter of what's doable. So anyway, in option 2, we stay with the same arrangement they have now. Cloud remaining as a PK, Cloud remaining as a PK, and the rest of the schools remaining as K6 schools. And then what we would do after that is take sub B of this, and in the second phase, create Clough as a middle school, and then move the elementary schools to 6 pre-K 5 schools. The difference between this and option 1 is that in option 1, we start with grade banding. In this one, we keep the current organizational structure up until the time that that the district decides to or can open up a middle school at Clough. So may I have the next slide? Okay, so option 2, 6th grade K6 schools. This would maintain the current organizational structure and would need considerable expansion of the elementary schools to accommodate general education and supported learning students. We don't believe that without considerable renovation, that this is sustainable. It's what you do now. And what you do now is not sustainable at all without major work. And we personally don't see this as valid. What is possible, though, is to maintain this while creating a middle school at Clough, a 6-8 middle school at Clough, and then converting all of your schools to non-grade banded pre-K-5. So in option 1, the goal would be, the 2 middle school goal would be 2 middle school 6-8, and then grade banded pre-K3 4-5. In this option, it would be 2 middle school 6-8, but you would have pre-K5 schools. There would be no grade banding. Those are essentially the differences between the two in this. And the feeder path, and so let's go to take a look at the actual tables. So Bellamy, you can see, would have, in this option, would have 680 students, but would have only 2 open rooms, okay, for supportive learning, for all of the other kinds of things. And you can see in some cases there are large class sizes. In the old upper years, there's 28, 28, 23, and 29. If we go to a phase 2 with Bellamy K5, there would be 5 open classrooms. Class sizes would still be fairly large at the upper end. And as I said before, we believe that some renovation, some change, some addition would be needed to add maybe 3 to 4 classrooms. And that's something we would want to talk with the architect. But again, this does open up some space in Bellamy as a pre-K5, as a pre-K5 school. Next slide, please. Okay, this is Denty. This is the next slide. I'm sorry. Denty as a K6 school is -1 classroom based upon the configuration we put together. And we know it's probably not -1 now because you're accommodating all children. Well, no, I'm sorry, take that back. And these are new boundaries. So in the new structured boundaries, this would be short 1 classroom. Going to pre-K5 at Denty, we'd have, there would be 4 open classrooms, and it's less because I didn't reduce kindergarten. Kindergarten would require 4. So, and if you take down first grade and second grade, you probably use up 3 of those classrooms. So again, Denty would need expansion in this model. Next, please. Okay, Gansevoort would, in this option, would, as a K6, would have one available classroom. Going to being a pre-K5 school, it would have 4, but again, it's got at least 2 grade levels that we would like to see. We'd like to see with less kids in them, lower class sizes. Next, please. Okay, Joy would in this option would have 3 open classrooms, but have 2 very large grade 5 and 6 rooms. In a pre-K5, Joy would have 5 open rooms, 5 rooms available. So again, as I said before, not every building might need expansion. You might be able to do centralized program locations, so that if we're looking at a building like Joy that's got 5 available classrooms in space, a program could go in there from another school, or it could be expanded. Okay, next one, please. Ridge Mills on this would have 1 room, but first and second grade a little bit larger than we'd like it to be. And if we go to pre-K5 with Ridge Mills, we're talking about 3 available classrooms, a net of 3 classrooms, but 2 of the grades are a little on the high side at 26 each. Next one, please. Okay, next one should be Stokes. Stokes under this arrangement, and that's the zone, would use up all 18 classrooms, and going to pre-K5, eliminating a grade level, it would have 4 net, but one of them, I think one is 33, so that would reduce that to 3 rooms. We need to adjust those tables also. So again, some of the leftover rooms, if we go back and revisit some of these tables, which you will before we meet with the architect, the room reduction will be even greater. And I think as we keep reviewing the floor plans, we need to really determine which rooms are kind of undersized. So that's option 2. So option 2 really offers the current structure, K6, 7, 8, which would require, we believe, a lot of construction, or a pre-K 5 with 2 middle schools, which we believe would require rebuilding cloth, of course, but it would probably be lesser on the elementary school levels. Again, these are things we need to talk to the architect about. Next, please. Okay,
If
so
I, sorry,
yeah.
if I may chime in here for a moment, in terms of the differences between option 1 and option 2 from a grade banding versus a K5 or a K6 model, in meeting with the principals, but then also walking through the facilities and learning more about the educational delivery vision, there's some factors that lean towards that the educators enjoy being with the students from the time they're in kindergarten all the way through 6th grade and kind of following their education and caring for them at that level. However, we, in terms of educational delivery, we got feedback that there already are programs and special initiatives for the K3 grouping, and then the 4 to 5, 4, 6 grouping. So in terms of the way the education is delivered, there are differences, at least based on the conversations we have had and from what we understand of your curriculum. So moving to a grade band option does have value in terms of strengthening the abilities and the professional learning community of those age groups in terms of educational delivery differences and kind of changes as the students get older. At the 4 or 5 level, it's preparing them for moving into the middle school level, and that educational delivery changes. So there are benefits to both, but based on what we have heard, there would be some strengths in moving to a grade banding option in terms of educational delivery and professional learning community opportunities.
Right. So the third option that we brought in is just another thing to look at is 7 pre-K 6 schools, meaning that cloth would be converted to an elementary school. Can I have the first slide, please? Okay. So in this option, cloth would be converted into a pre-K 6 elementary school. This would also require considerable expansion of the other elementary schools, and Stroud would remain as a 7-8 school. And I just doubled up each one. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So if we look at, well, I just one on page. So we look at Bellamy. Bellamy would have 4 open rooms. Next. Cloth would have 3. And when I say open, remember what I'm talking about. These are rooms that I've either not put back for class size reduction, or needed for instructional support, or needed for resource, or needed for different programs that exist in the building, OTPT, a number of different kinds of things. So it's not that they're open, like, oh, we're not doing anything with them. We are, okay? We're just not doing it in this particular presentation. Next, please. Okay, we're Dente 1. And again, in some cases, the class sizes are okay. We've done reduction, but I've got limited reduction because I've got limited classroom space. Next, please. What the district does. Gansevoort 1, again, with relatively high class size, average class sizes in some of the grade levels. Next. Joy 2, and again, a couple of grade levels that are a little bit higher than we'd like. Well, 3 actually. That I really, by the way, I think that this is just my own bias, and I think I share it with Suzanne and Catherine, that when you start to get above 25 students in a class, especially in the lower grade levels, really becomes not a great manageable or great educational situation. When we started this project, I wanted to target 21 or 22. Then, of course, with the 528 kids from Staley, that became not realistic. But moving towards the future, we'd like to target those average class sizes down. And we talk about what it means programmatically. Next, please. Ridge Mills would be 2, again, with a couple of larger class sizes. Next. And Stokes would be short 1 in this particular model. So this option is presented, okay, as just another option to look at if the case. By the way, going back to our earlier conversation with the building principals, all of them seem to agree that they would like the pre-Ks in their building. Is that, yeah? So, and to keep the pre-Ks local, so that this model, the 7-school model, is a pre-K 6 model. Because again, you would lose Clough as a pre-K school anyway, become an elementary school. But our belief is if you just look at the number of the classroom availability in this model, we don't think it's viable. It's just something that we think we wanted to look at and we wanted to share with you. But we think that, at least I think we believe that this probably is not the best way to spend your money. Is the easiest way to put it. Next, please. So, all right. So you want to go through this, Suzanne, or who wants to do this one?
Sure. So we have this slide as kind of a summary of some of the findings that led us to the options that we've developed. And then on the next slide, it's kind of where do we go from here? So basically, Ross has been able to determine that the enrollment at Rome City School District has been stable for the last 5 years. The projections show that this stability will remain for the next 5 years, and that while the new housing construction takes place in the city, based on those timelines and the types of units, it won't add to the student enrollment, or it'll be marginal growth. The current K-6 structure is not sustainable long-term in that the space demands on existing facilities have increased based on the closing of Staley. So looking at option 3 is a little bit challenging. Assuming that the closing of Staley is permanent, which based on the conversations we've had, that is the case, it is not something that we can include as part of the study, and it's something that all of the other schools are absorbing. Each of the options do require some level of redistricting, and each of these options would also require different levels of renovation and or new construction to accommodate the instructional and special needs programming. And each of the options presented are based on initial placement of students in their home catchment. So special permissions are not included in that. So based on those 3 options, as kind of alluded to previously, they all have a 3-phased approach to them. So we presented essentially 2 phases, and we're working on developing the 3rd phase of it. And I think some of the data we'll be working on refining it, looking at class sizes, looking at accommodation of art and music and other specials. But essentially phase 1 is a short-term alleviation to solve for the absorption of students from Staley. And some of the schools, you all have done a fantastic job kind of determining how best to handle that. But long-term, it's not a long-term solution. So in the short term is there may be a little bit of redistricting that can happen to alleviate that for the short term. What that results in is essentially larger class sizes for an interim period. Phase 2, in option 1 and option 2, that phase 2 is that Clough becomes a second middle school, moving pre-K into the elementary schools, which again, from an educational and community standpoint, makes a lot of sense. And that would either be the grade banding from option 1 or the pre-K to 5 in option 2 with 2 middle schools at 6-8. So again, phase 2 would be renovating and adding on to Clough to make it a viable middle school and temporarily displacing the pre-K students that are in Clough currently. And then phase 3 would be to then, once things have kind of settled out and those students that's who's going to those schools, to provide renovation and possible additions to maybe all of the elementary schools, but at least some of them, and possibly also Stroud Middle School to bring both Clough and Stroud up to a similar level to support educational vision long term. So it might be some of the programs that you currently have. So making sure that music and art have dedicated rooms, distributing supported learning in a more equitable and equal way. We've had some conversations about currently there are some schools that have a significant amount of supported learning and others that do not, and distributing that a little bit more equally across the schools and integrating some of those schools, students more into the general education classrooms. And then there's also sort of the desired educational programming. So STEAM spaces, drawing a blank on some of the others I have, but looking at what are the desired and wish list programs that are not feasible in the current facilities, and can we enhance those elementary schools to support those. So that would be sort of the phase 3 that, based on conversations with the architect, would probably be a couple of different projects. So again, we started with this slide. So here's what we've done and here's where we're going next. So this is sort of a snapshot in time based on the information and the synthesis that we've done thus far. And there's more to come in order to get to the final redistricting plan.
And now we're open to questions.
No San Francisco.
I think it's really hard to embrace any of these plans when none of them include any conversation about replacing Staley. And 2 of the plans don't, it's hard to wrap our heads around that in the short term. A couple of these plans don't address the things that we were most interested in, which were, number 1, reducing disparity and creating more equity based on where our catchment lines were drawn, and reducing class sizes. So I would say at a first glance, those are my worries. And I guess it was new to me tonight that it was never part of the conversation to have to talk about replacing Staley. So I got to process a lot of that.
Well, let me address that, okay? Remember, going back to this thing, when we started the project, okay, we started the project considering Staley as being one of the schools. So when we talked about equity, okay, we talked about redistributing programs and even redistricting. We had a lot more space to work with. So that space is now gone. So what we need, so our thinking was to take a look at what can we give you that you can implement for September, okay, because September is coming. And there's going to be no replacement for Staley between now and September. So what can we give you? So one of the things that the K6 alignments, because remember, these when I showed you the K6 in option number 1, I believe it was, those were redistricted lines. Now we could calculate 2 things that could happen. 1, we could calculate where the available classrooms are and where we could locate district-wide type programs, like instructional support programs, self-contained special ed, where there are some rooms with some excess space that would be taking children out of their homeschool districts, which they would do anyway, and redistribute them a little bit better. What we can't do without the addition, at least I don't believe so, what we can't do without the addition of new classrooms or change in the structures of the schools is reduce class sizes significantly. In a K6 scenario, we can't automatically take back those art rooms that currently exist if we're still working with the same number of students in the same environment next year. So what we're looking to do is that
I think connect is that when we went into this, obviously you're right, not having Staley was not a consideration when you presented to us last year and we entered into an agreement with you. But I think once we did lose Staley, anyone else on the board could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think once we made these changes this year, it would be to maintain for 1 to 2 years. Not we have to now do something again this September, because our discussion has been minimizing, if we can make this work short term, but it's 2 years, that would minimize transitions, right? So I guess that's, I'm trying to, a lot has transpired, and I know that threw a wrench. But I think our conversations up to this point have all been, okay, we got to wait for FEMA and the state to tell us what our options are for Staley, but there's got to be a replacement of that space without a doubt. But I think we were all of the mindset that might not be for, we might not do anything else for 2 years because of that. So I think that's where.
Now that you are pointing that out, I think what you're saying, absolutely makes sense. I think what we were looking to do is, if there is a way to additionally alleviate some of the initial hurdles from Staley closing, your point about not switching things up 1 year in, I think I hear that, and I think maybe we need to revisit that phase one piece of it and maybe consider that what you've already done is the phase one. So maybe we need to have that conversation about what that phase one looks like. But the phase one is intended to be a short-term alleviation of Staley. So, but what you're making me, the point you're making is now making me rethink some of that in terms of that maybe you've already done phase one. Then your points about equity and class size, those are absolutely part of this process and part of the goals. And I think the phase two and phase three are intended to do that. So equity in a lot of different definitions of that word. So in terms of program offering, support spaces, looking at the different schools and how they compare based on their community. And then class size, what we presented tonight has kind of an initial take on how can we start right sizing the class, the student counts per classroom. And we are still in the process of working on that. And it does require additional refinement to get it to a place that's better suited for your students.
I just want to jump in also here a little bit. Both option one and option two can lead to the same place. The same place being pre-K-5 and a two middle school scenario. So both of them can lead to that. One is doing it with grade banding, one is doing it without grade banding. Now, having said that, to get to the point where we're looking at the options, I basically had to take away an entire attendance zone, which was the Staley attendance zone. And I created, instead of the attendance zones with Staley, I've now created 6 attendance zones. I've adjusted the attendance zones to meet the needs of the existing K-6 schools. And so now those enrollments are a little bit better balanced than they were in terms of what you had to do in September. Okay, we've taken the numbers down. We've opened up some additional classroom space, although not ideally in every building. So we will have, with a little bit more refinement, which is what we're working on now, we will have a short-term solution for you for September. Okay, I think it's pretty close to existing now. Short-term being whether you decide that grade banding for September may create more space, may help, or if we stay with the K-6. Personally, I believe the grade banding does create more space under your current circumstances. So we can focus on showing you those two things with a little bit more refinement. And then the rest of the options, the rest of the phases are built upon that. Because even if you go back to the first or second or third slide and goals and objectives, there is a short term, okay, which is to replace Staley however we can, and a long term to create a district that has equity between each of the elementary schools and the middle schools and that kind of thing. I don't know if I'm addressing what your concerns are, but that's kind of where I see it going.
I think Dan did. I think we kind of inadvertently got forced into a phase one. Right? For where we were when we talked to you last spring to where we are now in November, totally pivoted. And so much has transpired since then. So it's why we have all been asking to kind of hear where you are at this point. My only other question in all of these is, where does district office go?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Where does the district office go?
Oh. I got a nice little suite over here if you want to come to New Jersey.
I think so. As part of Clough, that renovation and what that addition might look like, we have not gotten to that point of determining the details of that yet. But knowing that it's in Clough and that's a potential area for significant renovation and addition, that is part of the aspects that we'd be looking at. I did just want to kind of go back to, Ross, what you were just saying about, come September, that there's an immediate solution in terms of phase one. I think what I'm hearing the comment is that they've essentially already done phase one. So to skip phase one and not disrupt students again for a second year in a row.
So in other words, it's keeping the current structure. Okay, now the current structure until we're ready to go to a phase 2, which would be the pre-K 5 to middle. I guess what I'm trying to get. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I mean, we are looking for a long-term plan. So I think that going back is that, okay, what do we need for September? What do we need for moving forward from September? Is that kind of?
I don't think you're gonna know a lot of that till after next Monday, but John has a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Ross. Just curious, this is a lot of overwhelming stuff being thrown at us, but just curious as far as what are projections, if you have any, for staffing levels with these phases?
Okay, well, that's a great question. Okay, in terms of each of those tables, I changed the word room to sections, and I'm assuming we're assuming on the general ed. Okay, 1 teacher per 1 section. Okay, on the elementary level.
Mm-hmm.
So we could take a look at the faculty count on that. Then what does it mean for support services? So I think, yeah, we build out from that. I think that I'm not sure at this particular point, based on the number of sections we would project for September under a K-6 organizational structure with the redistricting attendance zones. I'm not sure what those numbers would be. Would it be less staff? I doubt it would be more staff, because to create more staff, you need more space. But would it be a reduction in staff, maintenance, maintaining the current staff, or an increase in staff? I can't answer that question right now. We will be able to answer that.
Yeah, I didn't know, because you were talking about, such and such a school needs 4 more classrooms and all that. I don't know if that was going to equate to teachers and aides and all that sort of thing. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think that becomes an incredible major. It's a major part of the study. It's when we determine, where things are going to be.
Okay, I know it's still a little early, but thank you.
It's getting later though.
So to me, in listening to you tonight, the entire linchpin to this redistricting study is your assessment as to student population growth. And, if you're wrong on those numbers, then all of these options are really not realistic, because the class sizes to me seem like they're already pushing the limits. So I'm a little curious about how you reached your conclusions on those. I know you said that you spoke to the developers and whatnot, but you cited a period between 16 and 17, or maybe it was 15 and 16 to now. And during those times, being a resident here, there really wasn't. I didn't notice any significant developments that were going on or anything like that. But you still saw a growth of 3.6% of the student population during that period of time. And now we're talking about a period of time over the next 10 years where we're going to, I personally feel, see a lot of growth and a lot of people moving to this community. My wife's a real estate agent, and Cree is a company that is going to be building in Marcy, and there's a lot of people that are coming in from out of state, and there's really a huge housing shortage in this area, and people are looking to come here. So I think that this development that we see in Woodhaven is just one of many that are to come. And I'm just concerned that if we're wrong on those numbers, what happens in terms of the recommendations that you're making today? And it doesn't seem to me like you really have to be wrong by a lot. Just by a little seems that it's really going to throw these sizes off, these classroom sizes off, to unmanageable levels. And so I'm a little curious about your pessimism as to growth, because it seems like you actually put in that there's going to be negative growth over the next 10 years. And I'm really kind of scratching my head about that.
Well, that projection is based upon cohort survival method, which is kind of a tried and true method of projecting enrollment. But let me address, without defending that, let me address what you're saying. Okay, did you notice that in every one of the options, I made a point of emphasizing that we need to add classroom space, because because we're targeting a lower classroom size, so I can't envision ever loading a building to 100% of capacity. I look at loading a building to around 85 to 90% of a capacity to allow growth. So and I don't do it by, and when the appropriate way to do it isn't to say, okay, the functional capacity of this building is 700, because that's a meaningless number. What's meaningful is the number of classroom spaces that you have. So if we take a look at targeting, let's say 22 to 24 students in a class, and we multiply that number by the number of classrooms we need, we leave room for growth. I didn't sugarcoat those class sizes. They're bad as they currently exist. But remember, you're very squeezed for space. How do you take 528 kids in 6 grades or 7 grades, distribute them through the district, and not jump your class sizes considerably when they were large to begin with? So I'm building, in doing this, we build capacity to recognize growth. Yeah, I believe that looking at the history of enrollment in this district, it kind of ebbs and flows, but doesn't get much higher or much lower than it ever is. It hasn't over the last 5 years. And I think that what we looked at a little bit was kids coming back from COVID, but not even going back to what the numbers were 2 years ago. So I'm confident in that number. I don't know what's speculated. I can't speculate on construction over the next 10 years. So I have no clue. No one does. I mean, you could guess at that kind of a thing, but we can't guess. So the best we can do is say, we're going to take a project now. We're going to build out to about 85 to 90% of capacity based upon classroom availability. And then we'll go, then we take it from there. So if I look at one of the schools, and that school, and I want to reduce that, and I'm looking at an average class size across the board of 26 to 27, and I want to reduce that down to 22 or 23, I can speculate out, in order to do that, we have to add 4 additional classrooms to this building. Okay, and what it'll do, in the immediate, it'll reduce your class sizes, but it'll give you room for growth. So you always want to build out and speculate based on room for growth. So it's not like I'm locked into this number and saying, okay, this is the number and this is where we're going to be, and I'm going to build to that number, or I'm going to recommend to that number. No, I'm going to recommend to about 85 to 90% of that number, and giving you room, giving those schools room to grow. So that's why, again, I didn't want to say in any of these options, I don't think neither did Suzanne or Catherine, we want to say in any of these options, no building is going to be necessary. We recognize in every single option, the district is going to have to do some renovation. It's just a matter of which option is the one that creates where you put your construction. If you go to a middle school level, a middle school concept, 2 middle schools, and you have pre-K 5 buildings, in some schools the construction will be lesser. If you stayed K6, you have to do a lot of construction, because all of the buildings would need considerable expansion. So it's not so simple that I'm saying you're only going to have 5,800 kids. That's what I'm going to make my recommendations to. That's just not real.
But I'm not seeing a significant decrease in the class sizes though either, in any of the options really.
Yeah, so the phase 2 spreadsheets, if you're kind of looking at that chart per school, I think, again, we're kind of at a halfway point in our refinement of this. And part of our goal is to work at it coming from both directions. So one is as we incrementally kind of reduce the number of students per class size, what does that mean to the overall capacity of the school? At the same time, Catherine and I, knowing some of the educational goals and working at it from the other direction, I don't think we've gotten to a point yet where the ideal alignment has occurred yet, and we're still refining that. So where you see some of the classrooms still at the 25, 26 level and working at what is that ideal, to take those students out of those classroom kind of leaves you with the need for half a classroom. So trying to understand, where can we best provide the additional space to right size those classrooms. What you're seeing in those charts, I wouldn't say are the final desired number. That's not our intent with those numbers. And kind of, again, working at it in both directions. And then the outcome after phase 3 would be to have achieved all of those educational goals. So right sizing the classroom size, students per classroom, incorporating the ideal program equity across all of the schools, and those types of things, goals that you have. In terms of quote unquote replacing Staley, from the initial conversations that we've had, it's not possible to demolish Staley and start over on that site. So if there's any conversation about building a new school entirely, a new elementary school entirely, that's not something that that has been discussed with us. So, but if that's an option that you're looking at, that provides an additional option.
But having said that, if building a new building, rebuilding Staley, okay, is something that's being considered, that's still a very long-term goal. It takes it take at least 3 to 4 years to build a school, okay, given all of the things that you got to go through. So again, it brings us back to the short-term solution. And what we're attempting to do, and what this past at redistricting, at least in that K6 model, and in that K6 model, is seeing where we can create space and then how that space can be utilized. So, for example, if there's a building with 6 classrooms open, and okay, how many of those classrooms can attract children, special needs program, instructional support children into that building to relieve space in another building. So it's a real issue. I mean, the fact is, it's very hard. Again, it's not a cop-out, it's just reality. It's very hard to reduce class size when you're redistributing 528 kids over the course. You're not increasing your classroom space. You're actually reducing your classroom space. As was pointed out earlier in this presentation, you've taken back some art rooms in order to increase classroom space. So I'm not saying this is an insoluble problem in the short term. It's certainly solvable. It's just a matter of really fine tuning. I think we've got a good base, and very shortly we can come up with some recommendations for the short term involving special needs. We have got to how many rooms do you need? Where are those rooms going to be? That kind of a thing. So those are the kinds of things we're working on.
If you've taken the current configuration and portrayed it the way you've portrayed your options, what I mean by that is you mentioned early on that you weren't considering special permission in your numbers. Now, if we take our existing post-Staley numbers, we could do the same thing, right? You could take those students that are now distributed amongst our elementaries, and you could see how many buildings are available and how that's got to change going forward. Have you done that?
In the initial, when I did the initial utilization of each building, I did it by school children attended. So I wasn't at that point. I wasn't aware of the extent of the special permission program. So early on in the process, I looked at there were 55 kids going to the school that don't live in this attendance zone. The way I work, the way my program works is that I match all the students to the map. So if I say if I call the system and I say, show me all of the kids who attend Bellamy, just show me the kids who attend Bellamy. And then, cluster lights up in Bellamy, but then there are lights all over the district. And I say, and then I look at those and, and I say, well, are these special programs? And I find that the majority of them aren't. Okay. So now that's maybe 50 or 60 kids taking up space in Bellamy. Okay. That, and if that results in the reduction of another school, it doesn't help Bellamy. and so do I start to redistrict kids into that school that's got lower population? It really can't work like that. It's kind of got to work the other way around, where if you maintain a special permission program, it has to be based upon room availability after you've loaded all of the kids who live in that catchment area into that school. Then you can kind of know what's available. And sometimes there just isn't space available. I mean, if moving a child by special permission pumps a classroom up to pumps a class size up to 31 or 32 kids, do you split that because one child is coming in for special permission? So I mean, these these are kind of critical issues. So the first step in the process is to find out what you need based upon where kids live. Then you've got to determine what you need based upon programs like special needs. Where are those kids and where are those programs located? So it's kind of an event of saying, how much space do I have? How much space do I have for programs? How much space do I have for kids who live in the attendance zone, general ed and special ed? And then do I have room to accommodate other kinds of things such as special permission? And I'm not attacking special permissions. I'm not biased one way or the other. I'm just looking at it from a space point of view.
But the way you've done it, it drives the per student numbers in the individual classes up, right? If you do that correctly. In other words, you take away all the special permissions, which are embedded in the system right now, because we just moved the Staley students. We didn't do anything with the special permissions that are already there, right? So, the schools are going to look different. They look different right now, and they're going to look different in September, based on what you're doing, right? But in the process, we're going to drive the numbers way up, right? The class sizes, I should say.
What's going to drive the numbers up?
The fact that you're considering only the students from the catchment area to be in a given school.
But
Correct.
at the same time, I'm adjusting the attendance zones to balance the map. So in other words, if I adjust an attendance zone, I then do the counts in that attendance zone to see, okay, if it's a K-6 school, I say, what are the number of K-6 school students living in this attendance zone? If those numbers are overloading the school or creating very large class sizes, I reduce that back, and then I see what's the next zone that I could take a look at to pick up these particular students. So it's kind of constant circular movement where I'm saying, okay, here's an attendance zone. I've got X number of kids. I've got too many. Here's a neighboring attendance zone. I've got space in that building. So can I tweak this attendance zone now to capture kids in this zone, reduce the enrollment in school 1, and increase the enrollment in school 2 to kind of balance them a little bit better. So it's not just I didn't just take special permission kids out of the schools and say, it's not what I did. I just said, show me where all the kids live. Show me where all the PK6 general education kids live, the K6 gen ed kids live. Just show me where they are on the map. And I count them in those, I count them. Then what I do, then I could tell you, okay, once I do that, okay, there are now 350 kids living in this zone. Previously, 65 of these students were special permission students because I see their data file says they're in a different school building. So, so now those 65 are added to that other school, and that other school may be crowded, so I have to reduce those students. So I think the point here is it's a starting point. It has to be a starting point. If you're looking at trying to balance class size, even under current conditions, it's very, very difficult without starting with students in their home attendance zones. It's virtually impossible. Okay, so that so those are the issues. So I'm only starting off. I'm not even saying don't have a listen. I don't make district policy, okay, or create district rules. All I'm saying is this is what exists, okay. If this allows for room in another school building and you could accommodate other students, that's great. But I need to have a starting point so I can actually get the class sizes down to a manageable level. I can count classrooms. I can see where there's free space. I can see where we could free up space. I can talk to directors of instructional support team and say, what rooms do you need to accommodate what programs? And here's where they are. I don't know if that's making any sense, but it's.
But again, you are redoing the catchment areas, right? And you are doing away with the special permissions, correct? And coming up with the students that are going to populate a given school.
Yes.
I'm having a little trouble hearing. I'm not quite sure what the question is.
Okay, I'll speak a little louder. Aren't you indeed taking, first of all, you're redoing the catchment areas to include all the students. So that all the students in that catchment area will go to a particular school.
Okay,
And you're not incorporating any students from any of the special permissions that would have taken students either out of that catchment area or put them in there from say another catchment area. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay,
I'm just counting students in that catchment area, irrespective of what school they go to.
yeah, your modified catchment area, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of redistricting is to modify the catchment area to either create more space or reduce enrollment or increase enrollment. You're looking at schools that may be under enrolled, which there aren't too many, especially now after Staley. You're looking at schools that may be somewhat under enrolled to schools that are somewhat over enrolled, and you try and balance the enrollment by tweaking the catchment areas. And that's exact the little attendance zones that were shown on the maps, which were not blown up maps, they were smaller maps. Those are all adjusted zones. Those are not the same zones that currently exist in the
Right.
district. Yeah.
But all your numbers are based on that, right? They're based on doing that, adjusting the catchment areas.
Yes.
And not having students from not doing the special permissions. The numbers that you show in your, what you're coming up with the number of students per class and whatnot in the phase one.
Just to make sure that we're on kind of the same page here. If I created a Stokes attendance zone, okay, which I did, okay, a tentative attendance zone, and I asked the system, show me all of the children who are K-6 students who live in the Stokes attendance zone, and it gives me a count of 400 students. I'm just making these numbers up. I'm just giving an example. Okay, I only know from that, without looking at the database, without looking at the data file, I know there were 400 K-6 students living in that zone. I'm asking for non-special ed kids, okay, gen ed kids. I know there are 400. Now, I could do a calculation of those 400, and I may find that some of those 400 students actually go to Bellamy, even though they live in the zone I've just created. So what I'm going to be telling you as a board, if every single kid, irrespective of what school they're currently attending, and not counting special instructional support, special needs kids, if I tell you, I can show you how this school enrollment is going, it looks now, how it will look, what your class sizes are based upon the 400 students that are in that area. Now, you may ask me, how many of these kids are special permission kids? And I can just run the report and say, well, out of these 400, there were 50. But to create the attendance zone, create the initial attendance zone, I'm counting every child who lives in that zone who is a general ed K-6 child. So the picture I'm giving you is based upon that. Okay, if I show you a kindergarten, 3 kindergarten sections, each kindergarten section having a class size of 22. All right, each one of those kids in that section live in that catchment zone, although they may not necessarily at this point be attending that school. How that gets rectified in the future, is really has to be based upon, the circumstance you're in. And you kind of, you're not in a great circumstance now because of the Staley situation. So, so so you need to look at these numbers that we present to you and then make some decisions as to which way you want to go with them. I'm going to try and give you what I'm trying to do, and pretty close to it, is give you viable numbers.
Ross, in the interest of time, is it possible for us as a board, and this is a lot, I have to agree with Mr. Nash, this is a lot of information to digest. We do have the community meeting coming up next Monday. Between those 2 times, is it possible for the board to develop a list of our questions and get them to Peter and have them sent to you? I think that would be the best thing. If everyone just emailed their questions to Mr. Nash, to our board president, and we'll start compiling a master list. And, this is a lot to digest. I have a whole page of questions in this book. you know, yeah, this is a lot. But it's 8 o'clock and we haven't even gotten into our regular agenda yet. And I guess I didn't realize that this was going to be such, we probably should have made this its own work session because we all have a lot to chomp on now.
Well, as far as you sending us questions, I expect nothing less.
Okay, good, good.
And I would also say that I think from our perspective to continue working on this study, I think there's maybe 2 points of very valuable information we would like from you all. One are those questions, whether they're clarifying questions or you know, you have a preference to see the data maybe in a different way or thinking around different potential solutions to something. I think the second part of the information that would be very valuable to us is that saying that the options that we've presented, those 3, and we can work out making sure that the equity, the class size, those factors are accounted for properly in the end. So kind of make those assumptions because that's what we're working towards. Of those 3 options, are there things, reactions that you have? So you like option 1, you like option 2, hate option 3, those types of responses and why, so that as we continue through it, we know kind of where your vision is and what you might like to see for the redistricting.
And above all, what you guys need for September.
Well, I think that changed. I think that again, I think that changed from the first time we talked to you to where we are today. And some of us sitting at the table have been through a lot of history of a lot of other transitions, so that plays into our thoughts. We are the district that moves kids a lot, so we're trying to minimize disruptions. But this was very informative and very well put together, and you know, we do appreciate the time that you gave to us. And I think that we're going to have to regroup as a board and I would urge all of the board members after tonight to start compiling those questions and the feedback that they've asked for. Because that was one of the deciding factors for us, was that you did want that feedback and you weren't going to make those decisions in a vacuum. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
And
Thank
happy
you so-
Thanksgiving.
Yes, thank you. You too.
Thank you, folks.
Have a
Thank you.
great Thanksgiving, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to move on to our next item, which, you know, ties in loosely to this one, which is the attendance update. Mr. Brewer.
Okay, the attendance update, as you can see, well, I don't have the other, Yeah, thank
The one from 28th?
oh no, that was.
That was at home in my
awesome.
attendance
Never mind.
folder, but that's what I.
As you can see, the blue up top is the new numbers from the previous time that I gave you. The numbers below, so for example, if you look at pre-K2, I'm looking at the yearly attendance by grade. The section in blue, 82.24, is the time period from the time we took the 83.07 to today.
Yeah.
So those are the
Basically,
numbers.
Last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Correct, the last 4 weeks.
That's what I figured, yeah.
So just a little bit of background on this. You'll notice that our 6th grade, our 9th grade, and our 10th grade actually showed a little bit of growth in that percentage wise. The others, we had a slight decrease on the grade level. On the back side, you'll have the same information, but we break that down also by, this is by school on this one. We had Bellamy and Gansevoort are 2 that you want to take a look at that didn't have a significant amount of change on those 2. Any questions?
Just for the record, we also have a column for staff attendance rate. And every time we talk about student attendance rate in the district, we try to also incorporate the adult attendance rate, because I do think it makes a difference if we're going to want to look at student attendance. I think it's important to discuss how the attendance of staff may not play into those conversations. So the last column, you'll see the attendance rate for the first 2 months, which was the same period as compared to the students. And the blue again is the last month of attendance rate. What I don't have on here for you is historical. And we will have that, the last 3 years historical for staff as well on the next subsequent updates, attendance update at the end of December.
So I'm sorry, on this monthly one, the the top, the blue is it marking period or
Last
month?
last
So
4
the
weeks.
blue is,
The dark blue on top.
Is the end of
So-
October to the end of November. Since the last board meeting.
so this one's September to October, the yellow, and the next one's October to November. The
No,
blue.
Did
No.
we?
No. No,
The
This-
yellow is the first
This
7
orangey,
weeks.
this orangey, yep. Mine
Yeah.
looks all the same.
Yeah, oh, yeah. You're
Orange is
looking at the-
1920.
So yellow is all
Green
of
is
last
the
year.
top yellow.
This greenish yellow, or this orangish yellow
It's
is,
down on
September
the
and
back.
October.
and the blue is
Is-
October and
Is
November.
just
So,
just November.
okay.
November.
but what I want
I'm
to clarify
sorry,
though,
I'm
is
better
where
with
you
the
said
table
what
than
the
I thought.
staff was, you said the staff was for the full, this whole school year? Right, because you said this, I just want to make sure I understood you.
The staff colors, the
Yeah.
yellow for staff is September and October.
Gotcha.
So
Okay,
it
that's
correlates to the
different.
yellow of the students. So it's the
Gotcha.
same time period as the student attendance. The
Gotcha.
blue
Okay.
is November.
I understand, I
So it
got you.
correlates to the
Yep,
student attendance.
yep, I
And,
got you.
and moving forward, you'll have the last 3 years historical with staff, and every month, every new number you get will be that month, so the
So-
next month of
Okay,
attendance.
this is by grade.
One side is by grade,
This is
one
by
side is by
building.
Thank
building.
you, now it makes
We
sense.
put the
Yeah.
staff on the side with the building just because there was less bars that kept it
Yeah.
unfunded.
Now, I might have missed this, and I probably did, but why are we all of a sudden looking at attendance? Did somebody have a concern, or
The
did somebody
board
request it?
The board requested monthly to provide attendance numbers to the board.
Okay, and do these consider anything with COVID, with all? the
Well, that was my
people?
next question.
Yes,
This is,
so this is
COVID
just,
is certainly a factor because you have quarantines, you
Yes.
have kids staying
Yes.
home ill. There's definitely a factor with COVID, but in terms of what the basis is for this is pure attendance data.
okay, okay.
Okay, moving on to commendations. Resolution for commendation, whereas the members of the Rome Free Academy boys varsity cross country team, coached by Ty Nam, girls cross country team, coached by Nicholas Gerard, girls varsity field hockey team, coached by Mackenzie Welter, girls varsity swimming and diving team, coached by Michelle Brown, and boys varsity soccer team, coached by Chad Reese, girls varsity soccer team, coached by Melissa Downs, girls varsity gymnastics, coached by Kevin Perrone, and the girls varsity tennis team, coached by Nick Natishak, have demonstrated a high standard of excellence, receiving from the New York State Public High School Athletic Association a Scholar Athlete Team Award by achieving a fall marking period average of 90% or higher. And whereas the members of the Rome Free Academy boys varsity cross country team, girls cross country team, girls varsity field hockey team, girls varsity swimming and diving team, boys varsity soccer team, girls varsity soccer team, girls varsity gymnastics team, and the girls varsity tennis team have brought credit to themselves, their teachers, their families, their coaches, and in turn to the Rome City School District. Now therefore be it resolved that the members of the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools do hereby extend their congratulations to the members of the Rome Free Academy boys varsity cross country team, girls cross country team, girls varsity field hockey team, girls varsity swimming and diving team, boys varsity soccer team, girls varsity soccer team, girls varsity gymnastics team, and the girls varsity tennis team for such outstanding academic achievement. And be it further resolved that the clerk of the board be and hereby is directed to spread this resolution on the minutes of tonight's meeting. I move the resolution.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Malachi. Is there any discussion?
No, just nice work and not surprising, because every year we see that these teams, for the most part, stand out. And it's good to see if they can continue the tradition, and I'm not surprised because we have some great students and teachers in this district.
Awesome way to come back for our first semi-normal sports season. So great job to all those students. All those in favor? Aye. Resolution to accept consent agenda, that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the consent agenda be accepted by the Board of Education. I move the resolution. Second by Ms. Reddick. Is there any discussion? And that ends on page 6. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on to the regular meeting agenda. In Mr. Nash's absence, I will move through the finance items. Action item 1, resolution authorizing the extension of a listing agreement. Whereas on November 14th, 2019, the Board of Education approved the agreement with Pyramid Brokerage Company for the listing of the former Fort Stanwix property, and whereas the November 14th listing agreement was extended to November 30th, 2021 by exclusive authorization renewal dates, November 13th, 2020. And whereas the board seeks to extend the exclusive authorization renewal dated November 13th, 2020 through June 30th, 2022 upon the same terms and conditions. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education and the Rome City School District as follows. The Board of Education approves the extension of the existing listing agreement with Pyramid Brokerage Company, Inc. through June 30th, 2022. I move the resolution.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Haggerty. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm a no on that. Resolution 2, resolution to approve MA Polsey Consulting Agreement. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agreement between Rome City School District and MA Polsey Consulting through June 30th, 2022. I move the resolution.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Malachi. Is there any discussion?
I was just wondering, I know this is a non-bid type thing because it's a professional service, but do we get any other quotes like if it's a non-bid? Like I think our policy said that we're supposed to have, if I remember the policy correctly, we're supposed to have 3 bids for a non-bid service, or because it's a lot of money. That's why I'm asking.
We did not, I believe the policy refers to procurement, not of services, but of goods, so we
Okay.
can verify.
Could
I
we,
believe it is goods and services.
could we table this until we find out for sure? And if we had an agreement with them previously?
No.
No, okay, this is our first year. Okay, so it might behoove us to check that out. Maybe we could, I make a move to table this until we see if it is, if it. Your concern is that it's goods and services, and you're saying it's, there's some confusion, right? We're not sure.
I'm not sure either. I thought it was.
Bob, do you know off the top of your head if it's goods and services?
I believe it's, the bids are more for, supplies.
No, it's quotes.
This would be non-bid. It
To
would be
get
3
quotes.
quotes, right?
We have to have 3 quotes.
That would be an RFP process
Right,
technically.
yeah.
Mm,
thought
Not
it was,
according to the,
I thought contract services, you didn't have to have.
It's non-bid, so the contract service, I think, would fall into it. So I'm saying, till we solve this, can we table it?
Isn't
Just
that
look at
the-
policy, right? Don't we have the policy? Can someone
I
pull
don't
the
have my
policy?
Chromebook. I apologize.
I have my
All
Chromebook.
right, let's pull it up.
I believe that's 4502 because that's the policy that we suspended.
We got services from them in the past, right? We have a.
He just said
We
no.
had a previous agreement to do a audit, but it's not an ongoing service. We've utilized their services before.
So that's over and
This
done
is
with.
different, yeah.
I would second Dr. Fontana's motion to table if we do, if we're unable to verify that tonight. I can't open my drive from my phone. Is it?
Well, I looked up professional services. I think that's why you're saying we don't have to go through the bids, because it's a professional service.
But if I
You say it
remember
was 4502?
4502, I believe it states that for anything, you still, due diligence is 3 quotes.
Policy said, I'm almost sure of that. How do I get to policies from here? This line, totally useless.
General procurement standards, would that be where it would be, or non-bid purchasing?
Non-bid purchasing.
No, I'm
Wait,
trying
here's
to- I'm
45
trying to
of
get to the
procurement
district home
services.
page.
Yes. And that's the quote form. Yes. For the general procurement.
Oh, yes, I-
I think it would be more of an RFP process myself. Professional services request for proposal shall be issued periodically as determined by the board.
Well, I
Well,
guess I'm not-
periodically, that
How much-
doesn't mean it has to be done every time,
I
correct?
forget off my head.
If it says periodically,
Not a purchase contract where you're,
Okay, so under 4,500, general procurement standards, paragraph, I guess it's 1 or I, can't tell. Anyway, it says competitive bidding, the district must complete a competitive bidding process that complies with general municipal law, section 103, before it enters into a contract for public work that involves spending more than 35,000. Am I reading this? Does that not apply to this situation?
It's not public work. no.
Okay, it's not public work, all right, so.
It's professional service.
Professional service, sorry.
let's bring a speaker into the school to talk in front of the kids. We don't go out and get street clothes for.
Materials.
Yeah, but that's considered a unique service. This is not. This is, there are technology companies. It's not a discredit to MA Pulte. They're a wonderful company. It's, we're being asked to approve the $200,000 purchase, and I don't know that we got competing quotes. So is $200,000 the average going rate for this?
we don't know.
Or would one bid have bid $500,000 and one would have bid 150? We don't know. And I mean, that's our due diligence to the taxpayers, correct? Is either if it's a bid process, you go out for a bid or RFP. And if it's a non-bid, it's a quote. It's fresh in my mind because we only waived it for the purpose of COVID purchasing and that sunset because we didn't have time to get quotes. But I feel like it even said, and I apologize, Joe has my glasses.
Yeah.
I can't dig deep enough to see, but I'm pretty sure that it has to do with ensuring for the public that you're not overspending or not favoring
911.
a vendor. I think it can even be a phone quote if I,
That's not accurate for professional services, nor how we've done it, but it's obvious that the group doesn't want to move this forward, so let's just move on tonight. We discussed this at length for months, so I'm just kind of surprised this is coming out in public at the last minute, but.
I haven't heard that the group is involved, is a whole is for this. I mean, we're almost 5-6 months into this contract. Why can't we look to, if we got to have RFPs, do it for next year?
here,
That's
John,
my,
just to clarify, we are not into this contract yet. The only group that's
Oh.
begun is Access Global. This group's we've been sitting on this until we got to a point where we're ready to move forward.
oh, so we haven't, okay.
Yeah, Pulte, the YMCA and Aptigee agreements have not, they have not done anything. AGG has been doing some work.
Okay.
Here we go. I think I have.
So if we approve this tonight, it would only be till the end of the school year, correct?
yes.
Correct.
All right,
All
this is,
four of
So,
these
so,
agreements-
so it wouldn't be 200,000 most likely.
so this is 45024. I think I have the right one now. It says comparable proposals not required, and then you go down to paragraph C and it says professional services. And it says when feasible, professional services should be retained after considering information about prices charged by ultimate service providers. However, the specialized and confidential nature of some professional services make them unsuitable for purchase through competitive proposal. For that reason, the board shall monitor the district use of professional periodically issue requests for proposal to assess the cost effectiveness of the services being utilized by the district. So it's not necessarily needed according to the policy 4502 sub 4A or 4C.
The only one that might fit in 4501(2)D says competitive bidding is not required for procurement of professional services, which because of the specialized or confidential nature of the services do not lend themselves to.
But I don't think this is that specialized. I mean,
Well, that's where.
So,
and so what's the one prior? There's something prior in that one. And I only recall,
Sole source, I mean, the sole source, but there's only.
isn't there something in there that says it can be a phone quote or it can be?
That's
That's
for
for goods. Those are for goods.
goods.
Okay.
So what are we doing right now? I mean, so we don't have them. What are we doing in lieu of them?
I know,
We're-
I just don't have my.
the purpose of this agreement is for them to come in and clean up our network closets and improve our infrastructure internally with technology. Right now, we're doing nothing but a messy closet.
I mean, I think we should go through with this and just deal with the full process, for next year. That's my opinion.
Well, there is a motion to table, I guess, if you want to consider it, we could vote on the motion to table and then consider the
Right.
line proposal as well, or underlying resolution, so. Unless you want to withdraw your request to table.
I'd prefer to be able to clarify this policy because I thought it was
Well-
goods and services, so.
Okay, so then what are we doing? So then
So
now we're
she's got a motion
voting
for
on the
table.
request to
Unless-
table.
And I seconded, so it's up.
Okay, all right,
So
so we
then-
vote on the motion to
Okay, so
table,
now we're gonna vote on this motion
To table.
to table.
to table. Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No,
No,
Okay, so we're not gonna table. So
That's
the
fine.
resolution was moved by myself and seconded by Mr. Malachi. All those in favor?
I,
the
Wait,
underlying
what are we
resolution.
talking about?
Yeah, the original resolution.
The original resolution.
To go forward with the
Oh, okay.
services.
Okay.
Okay. so I'm sorry,
Opposed?
I'm sorry.
And I'll be opposed. I'm opposed.
I'm a no.
Yeah.
Okay. Same
So is
number,
that
same-
4-3?
Yeah, same,
It's 4-3,
yes.
so it doesn't pass.
Is it a simple majority or is
It
it?
has to be 5. It does not pass if it's 4. It has to be 5.
Isn't John not voting?
Is John not
John
voting?
did vote.
John did.
John did- Oh, I'm sorry. There's,
If it's
Seven
5,
of
There's
three.
five,
Sorry.
there's
Yeah.
5-3.
no, I'm
there's
sorry.
8 of us, yeah.
There's 8 of us.
Okay,
Yeah, as long as
sorry.
5, it
Sorry,
passes.
sorry,
It
sorry.
has to be 5.
Yeah, it is
What-
5.
what?
Yeah, you just said 4. I just
Lisa wasn't gonna
clarified.
come and I got nervous of, did we have a quorum? And then I did the math of we had 7. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Of 6. We had 6.
So the last one should have been 5-3 and this one.
No, it's not.
That's one 7-1.
John joined us. Jeez Louise. Sorry. Initially, we were down Anna and John. Then we were gonna be down Anna, John, and Lisa. Then John and Lisa came. So stop making me do math. Sorry. That's why I was confused. Okay, item 3. Resolution to approve Access Global Groups LLC agreement resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agreement between the Rome City School District and the Access Global Groups to build out the Rome City School District 2021-2022 Equity Task Force Programming through June 30th, 2022. I move the resolution.
Second.
I'm gonna give that one to Craig.
Yeah, he's been trying.
Seconded by Mr. Ferretti. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Me.
No. Abstain? John, I didn't hear you.
I'm gonna vote no.
Okay, so you have
Wait,
3
who's the one that
no.
wanted to go through with
and
it this year?
abstain.
No, let's talk about it.
I know, but we talked about all these before.
You don't have
We're
5.
entitled to it.
3 no, 1 abstention.
I know.
You don't have
I
5.
can
You
exchange.
change your mind.
Yes.
4 yes.
4-2, 1 extension.
Yeah, the abstention doesn't count towards the 5.
You have myself, yourself, and John are no's. That's
Mhm.
3. An abstention is 4
You don't have
and
5
4
yes.
yeses.
Okay.
So this does not pass.
Does not pass.
These people have begun work.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So I
I
thought
guess we have
we
to-
were going
I thought we were
to
moving
approve
forward
them
with
for
this.
this year.
Yep,
And
yep.
then next year, put it up to a bid. That's what I
thought that
thought
was
we
the
had
conversation.
decided last time. But apparently, I abstain because I don't know enough about what it is that
That they
we
do.
want them to do.
Yes,
So I
yes,
can't vote no on it and I can't vote yes on it.
Yeah.
That's where my vote comes from.
And I voted no because I made clear when we had that discussion, I was in favor of the option of a lesser contract for this and our own person. And that's where I had stood from prior to the beginning of the year.
yes, no, I understand, yep, I know that.
And I voted no because I went to a meeting, I didn't really see much production. And it was only one meeting, so I shouldn't base it on one, but I didn't really see a lot of movement there.
Now, let me
I
ask
need
you
to go
this,
to the meetings because I need to know. I hear too much and I need to see for myself. And
is
so
this
that's
a
why I just
required
can't.
thing
vote.
right now, or is it just recommended? Is this something that we're required to do, or is it recommended?
It's recommended. We've been doing
Okay.
it for about 3 years. And
Oh, yeah, no, I
we've
worked
been
here
pretty
when
much on
we
the
started.
forefront of this statewide.
Yes,
That's
but
okay.
it's not a
Let's just keep-
requirement right now.
Not yet.
Okay.
no.
I don't think
It
it's,
will be.
I don't think it's,
Oh, it will be. Oh,
I don't
you
think
And it
got
should
something.
be.
work that we're opposed to. It's how the end.
No,
result.
but I just wanted to
So.
clarify that, so I just.
And item 4, resolution to approve YMCA agreement. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agreement between the Rome City School District and the YMCA of the Greater Tri-Valley through June 30th, 2022. I move the resolution.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Reddick. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 5, resolution to approve Aptigee agreement. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agreement between the Rome City School District and Aptigee through June 30th, 2022. I move the resolution.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Malachi. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm voting no on that one as well, and I explained why previously on that as well.
7-1.
Okay, and Mr. Nash, any report of the Finance Committee?
No, ma'am.
All right, and is it correct that your next meeting is Tuesday, December 7th at 10 o'clock?
That is correct, yes.
Is that just finance, or is that finance and audit as you
That's,
have?
yeah, it's finance and audit. We
Okay.
hold them at the same time.
In the we'll be discussing the controller's report thing that we got to do on the agendas at some point.
Yeah, the corrective action plan is a part of every finance agenda.
Yeah, this,
Okay. Oh, because I want to be part of that, and that's a daytime meeting, so that's good to know. Thank you, Dr. Fontana. Okay, turning the page. Mr. Haggerty, any updates on facilities?
Yes,
I missed
facilities.
your meeting.
Facilities met on, for the first meeting on the 16th of November. It was a fairly wide-ranging meeting. We covered a lot of things. I won't go into a lot of detail, but one of the more significant things we were talking about the kind of the way forward with the work going on at Staley, and also that was followed by an engineering meeting on the 18th, 2 days later. We talked about the phasing of the capital project and the energy performance contracts, and also the planning for the referendum, the March referendum for the new work. Most of that is work that's been accomplished in the various phases. The phase 3 of the existing capital project is probably the one that's still being discussed a little bit. But what was interesting about that was actually getting these two mixed up now, but we talked a little bit about the situation at Staley in terms of I think the superintendent had brought to all of us the fact that we have to make a move on whether or not we're going to close Staley permanently, and that we are going to do that, and that they're taking steps to do that, in particular moving things out of Staley and basically mothballing the system. A lot of the stuff that's coming out of Staley, if it doesn't have an immediate home, it will be stored at Fort Stanwix, which is up and running and available for that.
Can I, the one thing I missed was, on that agenda, it did say something about the portable classrooms that we were looking into. Was there an update on that at that meeting?
They're just awaiting SED approval.
Okay. That's a short answer. Thank you, Mr. Blake.
Looking into
Let's
that.
hope that's quick, because then we gotta worry about the procurement.
And it'll be next year.
It could be,
Okay.
it very well could be.
Okay. Did you have anything else, Mr.
No,
Henry?
we'll be meeting on the 14th. The portable classrooms obviously relate to one of the things we were talking about the last, and that is allowing the existing buildings to continue to operate in
Right,
in the post
Right.
Staley mode.
Right.
And I think right now that the portable classrooms, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Peter, but I think they're aimed at supporting, not actually classrooms, but support
Staff.
space,
Correct.
staff and special stuff.
It's meant to try and free up staff space out of the building so that we can free up more room in the building.
And make that configuration more viable going forward. So yes, we'll be meeting on Tuesday, the 14th at 4:30.
Thank you. Dr. Fontana, any updates for educational programs?
No, like I said, you love data.
We do.
We do. So Chris has already pulled out some great data on the STAR reports and cognitive reports for how the kids did on the state test. So we have lots of good things to discuss. So
And I do want to say that Mr. Nash and I did bring up in the agenda meeting how helpful it has been to have these committee meetings and make better correlations between, you know, what we're asked for in finance versus what we're asked for in personnel versus, you know, how it all ties together to support our educational programs. So your data helps us make better informed decisions for our kids. So thank you, Chris. On to you. Oh, and next meeting for that is Monday, December 6th at 4:30. Can't believe we're saying December. And now it's to you, Mr. Malachi.
All right. Thank you for your answers.
They're good ideas.
Action item 1, resolution to appoint teacher mentors for the 2021-2022 school year. Resolved that upon the recommendation of Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby appoints the following teacher mentors for the 2021-2022 school year as listed in the agenda, the resolution at page 8. I move the resolution.
Second. We'll give it to you, Lisa. We'll take a little.
Jeff, are there more coming?
At this point, this should be our final one unless we have more people hired, a new teacher hired that needs mentoring.
Perfect.
I think we're pretty well set at this point.
Thank you to everyone who's taking on that extra duty and sharing your expertise this year. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, action item 2, resolution to appoint coordinator substitute for the after-school program for 2021-2022 school year. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby appoint coordinator substitute for the after-school program for 2021-2022 school year. Cynthia Arthur at RFA at $40 an hour, effective date 9/15/2021 through June 30, 2022. I move this.
Second. Is that you, Lisa? Yeah. Seconded by Mr. Bowie. Any discussion? I just want to clarify, this is in Ms. Tiller's absence. The
Correct.
shoes, okay. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Action item 3, resolution to grant tenure. That resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby grants the following individual tenure: Robert Duffy, special education teacher, effective date November 5, 2021. I move the resolution.
Second by Mr. Bowie. Any discussion?
He's a dynamite addition to the high school. So he's what.
Congratulations.
Well, we haven't passed it yet.
But I do recall you presenting it. There was a presentation on this.
Hey, I'm on drugs, remember that. Medications. Not drugs, medications, folks.
You already said direct.
We call that delay the Fitzpatrick.
Comes in early, not late.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
8-0.
All right, congratulations to Mr. Duffy.
What I said earlier.
Action item 4, resolution to appoint instructional personnel probationary. Resolved that upon the recommendation of Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby appoints the following instructional personnel probationary as listed in the agenda at page 9. I move the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Malach, seconded by Ms. Herboe. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I have resolution to appoint extracurricular personnel. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby appoints the following extracurricular personnel as listed at action item 5 at page 9 of the agenda. I move the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Malach, seconded by Ms. Herboe. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Action item number 6, resolution to appoint competitive marching band staff. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby appoints the following competitive marching band staff as listed in the agenda at action item number 6, page 10. I move the resolution.
Second. Okay. Moved by Mr. Malachi, seconded by myself. Any discussion?
You'll see additional people added on. This is still being compiled as we have some vacancies to fill.
And is this for the winter program?
This is for the fall competitive season. Your winter programs are coming up next.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Any report of committee?
No, we didn't have a meeting ahead of this board meeting because we just had it not so long ago, but we do have one coming up Tuesday, December 7th, 2021 at 4:30 p.m. for anyone who wants to.
Mr. Malachi, if you would mind, at the agenda meeting, the topic of exit interviews came up. If that's something you could add to Mr. Morton, to Shelley might have already mentioned it to you, just question it.
Peter and I are already working on it.
Excellent. We appreciate that.
And where's code of conduct coming up? We putting that in personnel?
No, that's
People operation,
policy.
that's policy, okay.
Okay, so that meeting will be Tuesday, December 7th at. Okay, the other one is December 6th. I got a little scared there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
Next.
7th.
7th. Oh, no, the other one that is
Doesn't have-
finance is also the 7th, but it's in the morning.
That's one of those busy week when we,
Yes.
with
Okay.
at this building.
Moving on to policy. Oh, that's me. Action item 1, resolution to accept the first reading of policy 0110.1, sexual harassment of students. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the first reading of policy 0110.1, sexual harassment of students be accepted by the Board of Education. I move the resolution.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Malachi. Any discussion?
Isn't the point one supposed to be a regulation?
No,
Okay,
it used to be,
Okay.
not under the,
all right,
yeah.
under the new
Now-
system.
The new
Okay.
system, the point 1 and point 2 would be like if there's a sub policy.
Gotcha, okay.
And it will have an R if it's a regulation and an E if it's an
Okay.
exhibit.
I probably been told that and just forgot, so,
No, we're all transitioning.
yeah.
Okay, any further discussion?
I know it's an important topic, but I know we were talking about shortening the policy. I can see notice it was what, 10-page policy.
I think we did, so what we ended up doing with these was 0110 is the overarching, just a quick 1 paragraph. 1 and 2, we had some debate going back and forth, but we felt like there was some important language and went with the recommendation of NISBA to distinguish. The student piece has some things to do with educating students about how to advocate for themselves and how we integrate these lessons into the classroom. And point 2, again, also a little bit different language for employees and how they would report. And then we asked Mr. Blake to consolidate the regulation for both of these instead of having 2 long verbose regulations into 1 consolidated item while also staying within the letter of the law. So we think we did a pretty good job.
No,
And
you did. I guess I'm only kind of raising you a little bit.
you miss policy and you know it. And I do want to thank Mr. Blake because he did spend an inordinate amount of time helping us to sort through that and consult with our attorneys and make sure we were in compliance. So we came to some good compromises.
Very good.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 2, resolution to accept the first reading of policy 0110.2, sexual harassment of employees. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the first reading of policy 0110.2, sexual harassment of employees be accepted by the Board of Education. I move the resolution.
Second.
Second by Mr. Malachi. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. Resolution to accept the first reading of regulation 0110R, sexual harassment. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the first reading of regulation 0110, sexual harassment, be accepted by the Board of Education. I move the resolution.
Second.
Second by Mr. Malachi. Any discussion? I think the only thing I want to point out is that we do have to make sure that a plain language abbreviated version of this becomes available and is posted as the policy dictates. So can we? Yes, thanks for making a note, Mr. Blake. I don't want to forget to do that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries. We continue to forge ahead. I guess I would follow up on committee report with the question of where are we on the code of conduct? I don't know that I've heard of that group meeting or of a board member joining that group this year.
We get kicked off in January on that process.
January, okay. And then any miraculous update on board docs?
Haven't heard from them.
And that is also ticking away because it is our goal to be converted over by January 1st. So we will keep plugging away. And our next committee meeting is Monday, December 13th at 4:30. Miscellaneous business.
Want to read that real quick?
Yes, please.
Action item 1, resolution for the closure of Staley Elementary School and reassignment of students to Bellarmine Elementary, Dante Elementary, Ganswood Elementary, Joy Elementary, Ridge Elementary, Stokes Elementary, and Clough Early Childhood Program, whereas the Board of Education of the Rome City School District declares that an emergency exists because of flash flooding causing major damage to the school building on August 19, 2021, and whereas the damage affects the safety and property of the district, its employees and students, and requires immediate action, which cannot await a traditional reorganization process, and whereas the Board of Education has determined a need to consolidate its elementary school program into fewer buildings to preserve resources and educational opportunities for students, and whereas the district and the Board of Education have received additional input and guidance from the New York State Education Program regarding our department regarding development of a plan for permanent reassignment of students and use of district facilities. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Education determines that Staley Elementary School located at 620 East Bloomfield Street in Rome, New York will be closed effective August 30, 2021. I sadly move the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Malachi, seconded by Mr. Nash. Any discussion?
Just for a point of clarification, the board had asked, this is a requirement from the state education department in order to move forward with their procedures when the building is not occupied. That's why it's kind of late in the game. We were contacted by them and told that if we do not occupy the building at all with students this year, we must permanently close it. Therefore, in order to do that, you need a formal board resolution, and they need a copy of the resolution for their end and state end.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
The motion to go into executive session at this point.
I second the motion to go into executive session. It is anticipated that we will not return, and this is to discuss a homeschool appeal.
John, there's a Google link in your email.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you, Peter.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Lisa.
7-1.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy